All right, so welcome everyone. I'm Ashley, your IBCLC FNP, and here's another series of Voices of Milk and Motherhood, a series for National Breastfeeding Month. And I'm here with Shalawn Facey. She is a mother of two children, been a doula for over 2 years, and
20.
about a year or two, or a few, just recently, obtained her master's degree in maternal child systems, right? Am I correct?
Close. Maternal child health systems. That's
Maternal
close.
child health systems. Okay. And I'm gonna ask you some questions and we're gonna, talk about, your experience, our relationship too. We're colleagues. We've been working together for a few years. You worked at a hospital who's baby friendly and, that experience and how it has shaped us, your life experience and how it shaped you. And now working, in a hospital when you are also working in the field as a doula, right? So this will be a good opportunity for our families around the country, around the world to hear your story and to find out more about birth workers such as doulas as yourself. A lot of people still to this day are not familiar with doula work and their purpose, how they benefit families, how they benefit moms and babies and the whole dyad. So we're going to talk today and we're going to find out more about your story, and glad to have you and thank you for joining.
Thank you
So
for
I'm
having
going
me.
to start off with my first question. Tell me a little bit more about yourself and your journey into birth work and breastfeeding support. Like, how did it all start?
Sure. Thanks for asking. So it started, I've always been fascinated with childbirth and everything around that. Fun fact is when I was in like elementary, middle school age, high school, I thought I wanted to be an OBGYN. So that's kind of like it started there, but then I kind of veered into another direction. But I think whenever I had friends that had babies, I was always inclined to want to help them, be there for them, support them. And when I had my first, I knew a little bit about doulas, but not a lot. But I knew that I thought that'd be cool. After I had my first child, I didn't have anyone in my family who breastfed, but I knew that I wanted to breastfeed, and so I did. But it wasn't easy because I didn't know what I was doing. In the hospital, they were like, "Great latch, okay," and so I just went along with it, even though I was in pain. And thankfully, I think I called someone on from La Leche, and on the phone, just was just a phone call, but they were able to like walk me through steps. And it was, to me, it was like the most eye-opening, like aha moment. I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. And I thought the person was like an angel, right? But after I had my son, I wanted to support women. I wanted to help them. And so I wanted to be a doula, but I didn't know how to do that and have a baby that I was taking care of and a toddler, because he was a toddler at this point. And so a midwife that I happened to connect with, network with, she mentioned, she was like, well, why don't you be a postpartum doula? Because that's more scheduled. And I'd never heard of it before. And I looked into it and I got into it. I got trained and apprenticed with someone who had been a postpartum doula for years and years. And she took me under her wing. And then I became a postpartum doula. And so that's kind of how it started, where I was supporting families right after they had their babies. So anything from feeding to how to change the diaper, to how to swaddle, to how to care for their baby. And it was great because I was still able to be the primary caregiver to my son, but also support women at the same time. So I had the best of both worlds. And then just kind of from there, just jumped off into everything else that I started to do from there. So started off as postpartum doula. And then fast forward, after I had my daughter, I somehow, again, just meeting people, I became trained as a birth assistant. And so I was working at a birthing center and I was able to assist midwives at a birth center, which was great because I got to see natural births, unmedicated, seeing the strength of women and what they were able to do, just listening to their bodies and working with their bodies. And it was an amazing experience. So I did that. That allowed me to also assist home birth midwives, which I still do periodically. They'll call me. Then later, I became certified as a lactation counselor because it just made sense. And then again, morphed into being a labor doula. So that's kind of how I had my start. I started just me being a mom, wanting to help and wanting to give back the same support that I got, wanting to give that to other people.
So who was your support? Who helped you and like kind of gave you, was it just something inside of you that you experienced when you were nursing your children or anything in particular? What was the catalyst that helped you really say, okay, this is something I can help moms to do too?
Yeah. So I think, like I said, I didn't have benefit of having people around me that
Mhm.
breastfed, at least in my family. But I think I knew enough that I knew that it was beneficial for my baby. So I stuck with it. And I was determined to stick with it. And so I exclusively breastfed my children. But I think it was because I didn't have that support that I wanted to be able to be support for other people. So it was more that I wanted to give people what I didn't have. I think I didn't know enough people to have them surround myself with the support that I needed, that I decided I want to be able to give that support to other people. So that's kind of what pushed me to do what I'm doing.
That's great. And you talked about La Leche, and I find that a lot of people, that's where it all started for the most part. It's an old organization.
Yep.
And a lot of people really reached out to La Leche. And I think that, they have been a very helpful organization in helping moms, even just getting that start. Because me too, as you shared, like I didn't have as much support for breastfeeding, but because for me, I was working, I was actually a lactation specialist, CLC, before I had my kids. I did see all the entire, like the newborn aspect and how it benefited them. So that has been like my catalyst. Just being a parent, a lot of times it could be so motivating to really, help and empower women because you learn a lot about yourself during the whole process. Like, I know if there's anything more detail, how would you share, like how it has shaped you as a person or even like your children, like the impact, the relationship that you have with your kids? How do you think that the work that you do can help moms have that if there is even a positive relationship, you think that it can benefit, for you and your children choosing to breastfeed versus, another form of feeding or another, dealing with yourself through the birth period?
I think for me, I feel like, and I feel like that there was a connection that I had with my children that I don't know I would have had if I was, let's say, exclusively formula feeding, right? Now, obviously, all parents love their children and nurture their children, but there was a different connection that I had with my children, no, especially knowing that I was the one providing the nourishment for them, like the nourishment came from me. I think gave me a different level of respect for the connection that I had with my children and how important it was to their health, to their well-being. And I think I saw the benefits of it, right? Like, I mean, we know that we talk about the benefits to their health, etc. And both of my children were fairly healthy. I will say my first did have a lot of allergies, but I do feel like had I not breastfed, I wonder how much more allergic he would have been, how much more issues he would have had I not exclusively breastfed him. So I think, and it also, I think doing not just breastfeeding them, but also just doing the work that I do, being a birth worker, like that's all my children know. They just know me as like in the middle of the night, mommy goes to a birth and I come back in the morning, right? Or I leave all of a sudden, we're about to do something, mommy has to go, she got a phone call, she has to go to a birth. But having that kind of work allows me to have more of an open conversation. So they know a lot about birth, probably more than they want to know, right? About breastfeeding, about birth, because that's just a part of what I do. So it almost normalizes all of it, right? It's normal to breastfeed. It's normal to give birth to children, unmedicated or medicated. It's normal to have a doula as part of your birth because that's what they see. And so I think that being a birth worker, being a lactation person has help to normalize a lot of the things that people see as specialty or different. For them, it's just normal because that's what they've seen and that's the world that I'm around and the people that I know. So I think it's helped to make it normal for them that it's not an odd thing or weird thing. It's just like, oh, that's just normal.
And then speaking of specialty, I always, found it, I guess, unique, especially because we're both from Brooklyn, right? And I went to a public, school throughout my entire, and then you told me like, I homeschool my kids and I'm like, what? How did you do that? How did breastfeeding and parenting weave into that lifestyle? Do you think it benefited you in any way, or you think it could be, or there's like no relation or correlation in that sense? And even in your work that you had, like being a doula, I mean, had the responsibility of not only teaching your kids at home, but you were working as a doula as well, and
Right.
helping people with breastfeeding.
That's interesting. I've never really thought about that. I don't think the impact of breastfeeding connected to homeschooling necessarily, at least with my first. But I will say that with my second, I think because of the lifestyle of just being a homeschooler and having the flexibility of being with my children a lot and doing a lot, that it afforded me, I didn't have to worry about, oh, I'm running into I have to go, I'm working 9 to 5, I have to go to an office, I have to pump. I didn't have to do that because my children were with me. And so when my second was born, when we went places, we just all went together. So I had my baby with me. I was able to breastfeed. I have a vivid memory of my son was 3.5 and my daughter was 8 weeks old. And we took a train ride to South Carolina with other homeschoolers, like an educational trip. Mm-hmm. And she just stayed in the sling the whole time. I breastfed her when I needed to. And we just walked, and it was just seamless and it was fine. And it wasn't like looked down upon or odd, because I think I was surrounded by, yes, there were homeschoolers, but there were also people that just understood that this is part of life. Like, people do this and you take care of, and I had a community, right? So like if I needed to do something with my older one, there were always hands willing to hold my baby so they could watch her while I could work with him. So it was a community of people that were just looking out for each other. I think homeschooling, I actually made it easier for me to be a birth worker. I will be honest, working a 9 to 5 or a traditional full-time job, it is harder to be a doula. But being a homeschooler, it was so much easier because my schedule was fairly flexible that if I got a phone call, I can just go and be at a birth, because schooling doesn't have to happen between the traditional hours of 9 and 3. That if I needed to be at a birth one day, that was just a day off. And then the next day we would pick up and start all over. So it really didn't disrupt my children's lives in terms of their education. And it allowed me to have that flexibility that I could be there both for my children and for the people that hired me to be their doula.
Yeah, I definitely feel you on that one. You know, especially me being a person that has worked in institutions my whole life. I see, you know, the challenges behind that, having that rigid schedule and really, meeting your parenting goals, right? Whether it's like breastfeeding, educating your children. So I do see that. And that is some things that a lot of moms, their families, they struggle with, especially going back to work, ensuring that they can maintain their milk supply and, you know, not worrying about their child not getting the food that they need and who's caring for their child. So I see the correlation. I also see the correlation in the organization and the strength that it takes about it too, ensuring that it gets done, but at the same time, you know, helping other families as well, right? So I see it on both sides of being positive and, you know, somewhat challenging. Like over the years, how have you seen like attitudes towards breastfeeding shift, like in hospitals versus communities? And I know, I think that's kind of the reason why. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about, you know, choosing, why you decided to get your master's degree to maternal child health systems. Like how you see the attitudes and shift since the time you had your kids versus now?
Yeah, so I think when I first had my children, obviously people breastfed, but it was still not, at least in the hospital settings, I definitely saw there were a lot more formula, there was a lot less education, but there were people that were breastfeeding. I think now what I notice as a doula going into different hospitals, it's almost natural. I would say even, so I also teach expectant parents, and I will say most of my students, if not all, are planning to breastfeed, right? And I don't think that was always the case, right? You know, we'd go around the room and say what their feeding choices, and just about all of them want to breastfeed. Now, some might say, well, I might do both breast and formula in case breastfeeding doesn't work out, or I want to exclusively breastfeed, but I don't come across a lot of people that say I want to only formula. And I think that's where things have changed, where it was pretty common, right? Like, okay, yeah, I'm going to formula feed. Maybe I'll breastfeed a little bit. But I think it's more and more people are understanding and are more educated on the benefits of breastfeeding, that I think more people are choosing to go that route. Especially people that are choosing to learn about childbirth, learn about education, you know, educating themselves on what that means. Those people, once they have that, like breastfeeding is automatic. Like I do find that more and more people, that's automatic. It's not even something that they're not going to do. Even with the clients that I have, it used to be when I would talk with them, say, well, if you're planning to breastfeed, this is what I'll do. And now I don't even, it's almost like I don't need to say that, because everyone is like, yeah, I'm planning on breastfeeding. That's what I'm going to do. So I think that's definitely changed. But even with that being said, there are still some discrepancies, right? So within communities, breastfeeding isn't as prevalent. We know that within the Black Black and brown population, more so the Black population, breastfeeding is less for a lot of various reasons. Part of it, our system is a little broken, right? And then other things too. So I think the reason for me, that's part of the reason why I chose to go back to working in a hospital, is because I wanted to be able to help and support people to be honest, look like me, that want to breastfeed, and encourage them to do it and let them know that I did it, right? I did it with 2 children, or okay, and that it's not odd. And I'm a Brooklyn girl just like you are, just so they understand that this isn't something that's just for certain people. But then also, I think the reason I chose to get this degree is because I do recognize that our system, when it's surrounding maternal child health, is a little broken, and it does need some fixing. And we do need to, there are a lot of things that need to change. There are a lot of things that are antiquated, need to be brought up to speed. And there are a lot of things that are not equal for every person that's choosing to give birth and breastfeed. And so because of that, I wanted to be able to have a seat at the table, if you will, so I can help to make the change, help to change policies, help to change the systems. And so that was the reason I went to get this degree.
Yes, I really feel you on that one. That's something that's very, it touches home with me too, because, when you think about, like people in general, like, we're all people. I mean, everyone's supposed to experience the same level of care no matter what, right? No matter what they look like, right? And, there is low income everywhere, right? There's people of all different type of race, ethnicity, and why should the hospital, because of the community it serves, whatever the case may be, have like lesser resources, opportunities? Mm-hmm. And, that's something that is just like something I kind of really don't even like entertain and tolerate per se for me, like in that sense. I think it should exist, or even have the mindset of it existing, though unfortunately it is a reality, right? But me, I'm a little above, right? And extra my mindset of how I feel about certain things, right? This has to happen. Like, it doesn't make any sense. That's just like how I feel, especially when it comes to, race and ethnicity, right? So we all have blood running through our veins, and there's nothing else, but unfortunately, that's what the data shows that Black and brown people are having these challenges, meeting their infant feeding goals, their health goals, so unfortunate. That's why we're talking about this today, and to learn more about how we can really make sure we close the gap on that completely and forever, right? And that's the goal. Tying back into breastfeeding a bit, but any myths that, you hear coming up a lot about breastfeeding that you just wish more people understood in general?
That if you are a working person or person in school, that you're going to have to formula feed, or you cannot exclusively breastfeed, or that if you breastfeed, your child is going to be attached to you and you're never going to be able to go anywhere because they're going to always want to feed from you. I think those are the 2 biggest things that I hear. One that I used to hear, I don't think I hear it as much, is that breastfeeding is supposed to hurt, like it's supposed to do that. So if it hurts, just grin and bear it. It's kind of like a rite of passage, which obviously you and I both know is far from the truth. Mm-hmm. But I think those 3 things, those 3 myths, I think, are fairly common, and those are the things that make people choose not to, or not do it for long term. Or honestly, we're just like, why am I going to bother? Because I'm going to have to go back to work. So why even start if something that I am not going to be able to finish? Or if it's supposed to hurt, I don't want to be in pain, so I'm not going to bother, right? Or that baby's going to be attached to me. I want to have a life. I want to be able to do things. I want to go to work. I want to do things. And I don't want to have this baby attached to me. And I think they're all myths, but because that's what they hear, they believe that these myths to be true.
Definitely. Those are definitely some common ones, big time. Especially the one about going back to work and the cling and being attached. And, we know that this is supposed to happen. Babies are supposed to be attached to their parents. But, as lactation professionals, there's ways of, introducing, bottles if you have to be away from your baby, right? And you can still meet your goals. We live it. We, worked in the field, worked in the hospital together. We had a lot of colleagues that were professional people came back some as early as 6 weeks, right? Some of the residents that we were, and they were able to breastfeed, right? And when I say residents, the pediatric or the providers, all of them, whether they're pediatric or medical, or even 3 months, it can be done. It's just, getting a plan, having the right person to really assist you. So that is for sure something that can be achieved. And thank you for bringing those myths up. What has been, and do you have a story of what has been like a very rewarding moment through supporting families, through breastfeeding, or even in your doula work?
Yeah, there are two things I can think of. In terms of breastfeeding, I had a doula client that, the birth process had its challenges, but at the end of the day, she had a healthy baby girl. She was healthy and all went well. She wanted to exclusively breastfeed, and that was her choice. And at some point down the road, I don't remember how many weeks or months her baby was, but her baby wasn't really gaining the weight that she probably could have, or wasn't gaining as well as the baby was required. And so when she went to her pediatrician said, okay, we're going to have to supplement. Now, let me backtrack and say that as a doula and lactation person, I've often had clients who are breastfeeding and baby's not putting on weight. And usually they come back to me and say, pediatrician said I have to supplement with formula. You have to give the baby formula. And then they're like crying because they feel like, oh, I didn't make enough for my baby, and they feel horrible and all this kind of stuff. So I have that in the back of my mind when this client goes to the pediatrician. Mm-hmm. So she goes to a pediatrician, and her pediatrician says, okay, we're going to need to supplement. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to breastfeed your baby. You're going to pump breast milk, and you're going to give the baby pumped milk in the bottle after every feed. And so that's what she did. And she did that for a while. Baby started to put on some weight, gain good weight. And then at one visit, the pediatrician said, okay, you can stop with the pumping, keep breastfeeding like you're doing. You don't have to do the pumping as you were before. And the client, when she talked to me, she was like, you know what, Shalawn, all of that, the pediatrician never once mentioned the word formula. And she was impressed by that. And it gave her confidence that she had enough to give her baby what her baby needed without having to introduce formula. So she was able to stick with her exclusive goal. And it made me feel good as a provider to know that there are providers out there that are willing to work with a mom to help them meet their goal without having to supplement, and understanding that supplementation does not always mean formula. It just means that we're supplementing the feed, but the feed can be supplemented with breast milk. And so I think that was an amazing story, because she at no point did she feel discouraged, because she wasn't made to feel discouraged. Her pediatrician never mentioned formula. She was able to still breastfeed. She was willing to do what she needed to do, and she supplemented with the breast milk until the baby got to a weight that was acceptable.
Great story, and it hits home with me, especially when it comes to, my vision in general of what healthcare should look like, right? Breastfeeding not be an afterthought, but ingrained into primary care, right? For mother and child, right? It shouldn't be something where, okay, here's the problem. And, this is how it was taught, right? If you can't breastfeed, there's some formula here, right? And that's not the case with this provider. And that's an awesome story. And we need more stories like that. Right. We need, I do have some clients, they have challenge, they live in different areas. And I've heard them in the past, talk a lot about, not having a pediatrician that really supports their breastfeeding goals, or just someone who is breastfeeding friendly. And, we need that everywhere. That's just how it should be. So for sure. And, since, you've gotten this, degree, we talk about policy, and what gaps in policy do you see most affecting breastfeeding in the underserved communities that, that we've worked in, or that you've worked in?
I think there's a lot of education that has to happen, right? But it really does need to start from the beginning. And what I mean by that is it needs to start from providers having conversations with their patients, helping them to understand the benefits of breastfeeding, not just to their baby, but to themselves. Help to normalize it, right? I think if it becomes part of conversation, or almost an expectation that this is what's going to happen, that I think it starts to change the direction and the trajectory of where we're going. Because now it's just like, okay, well, how do you want to feed your baby? right? And not to say that people shouldn't have the right or choice to choose formula, and they should. But I don't think that people openly understand and have the right, feel like they have the right to breastfeed. And what I mean by that is you can choose however you want to feed your baby, right? A fed baby is a healthy baby. We understand that. And if someone chooses to formula feed, we by no means would judge in any way because that's their choice. But I think formula has become so commercialized, so normalized that someone who might want to breastfeed, but maybe they're a little timid, maybe they're like me that didn't have anyone in their family that did, they might not feel as empowered to say, I want to do this. And so I think we need to make formula not as normal and make feeding your baby from your body to be a lot more common, right? And if you choose the formula, great, but let's make it normal to breastfeed. Because right now, let's be honest, in some communities, it's become sexualized, right? And so people see the breasts as a sexual organs. And so when they think about breastfeeding, they think it's gross. They say a lot of negative things about it. They think it's, it's weird, it's embarrassing, like all these things, these negative phrases that go into people's minds. Who would want to breastfeed if you're hearing that around you in your society? But if we change the narrative and say, hey, breasts were developed for feeding, that's what they're there, right? Let's start there. And this is what is supposed to happen. This is normal. This is natural. Your body naturally makes milk to feed a baby after you've delivered a baby. This is what your baby needs. And I think if we start having these normal conversations, that can change the mindset I think that people have to feeding their babies. And I think a big part of that, besides providers of the person that's having the baby, right, the mother, it also needs to be big time. And you and I have had conversations about this in the pediatric realm, right? Because that's, I will say lots of times will make or break someone's success in breastfeeding. Like I mentioned in the story, I hear a lot of stories of people going to pediatricians and pediatricians like, oh, baby's not getting enough. Let's give formula. Right. And sometimes that's the case, but lots of times it doesn't have to be. So we have to make it normal, and we have to not only parents, but providers truly understand the makeup of breast milk, how it works, how it's beneficial, how weight gain happens, like all of those things, because they don't understand it. I think it makes it hard to support it. And they'll tell me quickly, well, in my country, we don't even ask people what they're going to feed because it's just automatic that they're going to feed the baby from their bodies. Like that's just what they do. And only if there's a problem or a need, then we give in formula. Yeah. But and I recently had a doctor tell me, she goes, but in this country, we ask them, which one do you want to do? Right. Yeah. And so we like, oh, I can do this. And not to say that you can't, but I think we've made formula such the norm that even if someone could totally breastfeed, they don't have any social constraints, they don't have any health constraints, anything that really would deter them from breastfeeding. But because it's there and available and everyone's talking about it and everyone says, just do this, they do it.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate reality of it, especially, being from the United States. For sure. I do see, I hear the differences as you're describing as well. I hear people telling me like in other countries, like they're not discharged from the hospital until the mother can breastfeed, right? I hear, stories like that. But here it's like, well, if you can't, here's like a bottle or something, like, but it's something that definitely has to be addressed. And I'm glad that you really touched on that because that is very important. If you could implement one nationwide policy change today to support moms and babies, what would it be?
I think in the hospital, you mean? Like when they're delivering?
It could be in the hospital, but it's a nationwide policy because, policies that exist in the community as well as I believe in our state, we had some positive outcomes. I believe 2 years ago on Juneteenth, it was modified where now people don't have to clock in, clock out to pump, when they return to work. It's different now. So we can be out in the community. It could be in the hospital for sure.
I think one thing I would change is that we treat the dyad and not each individual. And what I mean by that is that we're not just treating the mom or just treating the baby, but treating them as a whole unit and having a collaborative conversation. And so let's say this person over here, she decides she gets pregnant. She wants to have a healthy, happy baby. She meets with her provider, whereas a midwife or OBGYN in her prenatal visit or at one of her prenatal visits. She also meets with a lactation person who talks to her about breastfeeding. And she meets with a pediatrician to kind of go over and get an idea of this is what some things are going to look like. And she meets with a nutritionist, and she meets with a physical therapist. And so that becomes part of her care. And then as the pregnancy progresses, she meets with these different people. But these different people behind the scenes are having collaborative meetings to talk about this person and their baby, right? They're not just saying, oh, I'm just talking about this and this. Like, they're talking about them collectively. So they're all in one accord. They're unified in what they're deciding. And so as things move on, they're all on the same page. And then when the baby is born, they're all kind of working together. So now this person is like, okay, I'm going to breastfeed. I already know what I need to do. I've already spoken with the lactation person. I know how I need to eat. I know how to care for myself. The pediatrician's already told me, there's already this collaborative care. So for me, I think one of the biggest things I would change is, I think all healthcare should be, but if I'm just going to stick with the maternal child health, is that we treat the mother and the baby as one, as a dyad, but it's collective community healthcare, not just each in a silo, but everyone's talking to one another. So everyone's in one accord and knows what's going on.
You were really speaking my language. This is it. This is what it is and should be. I'm so happy you brought that up. You're literally, that's, what the goal is. That is what the goal is. And that's what healthcare should be. As you described, yes, it should be in every aspect, but the mother baby dyad is a foundation, is where our future leaders will succeed. Without health, there's nothing else. That's the foundation of life, period. If you don't have health, you have nothing else. And really to invest in the health of mother and babies at that stage where you can really have that collaborative, that is excellent, Miss Facey. I'm calling Miss. That is excellent, Miss Shalawn. That's how it's supposed to be. And I'm so glad you brought that up.
It should be. And I think, and it's funny, when I was actually working on my degree, that was something that we talked about a lot, because there are places that are doing collaborative healthcare. And I think it just makes sense. And I think so many things would be so much smoother and easier if that's how we treated pregnancy, childbirth, and beyond, right? Is if everyone spoke together and was thinking about the two in one unified way, I think it would make such a difference.
What advice would you give to new moms trying to breastfeed in today's culture?
I would say stick to your guns. And what I mean by that is, if this is what you want to do, stick to it. Don't let someone sway you. But I would say have at least one support person who can be there for you. So when someone, auntie or grandma or neighbor down the street wants to say what you're doing is wrong, they can be there to help defend and say, you know what, this is her choice. This is what they want to do, right? I think, so one, I would say stick to your guns. Two, I would say have at least one support person that's going to have your back and support your choice. Get support. Don't be shy to ask for help and support. We're supposed to do that, right? This is not supposed to be like you're in a bubble having your baby and no one around. We're supposed to bring the village and the community in to help us. Reach out for support.
I agree, for sure. We need each other. We need to support each other. Women need to support women. Men need to support women. Family, friends, the community. That's essential. And the more people that, know about how wonderful and how important breastfeeding is, it's definitely essential in really helping moms get that support they need. And based on everything we shared today, you discussed and I asked you, being a doula and a lactation counselor, what is one message that you want our audience to take away from your story, especially in correlation to a doula and lactation support and the difference it makes for the families that you've cared for, or families in general who should or need this service?
Um, I think the support is there. And what I would say is again, reach out, get the support, get the help. I do feel like, as we mentioned earlier, there are discrepancies. We know this. And having the support of a doula, having the support of a lactation person, we know shows to make differences in the discrepancies. So what I would say is that we need to educate more people on what doulas are, what doulas do, how they can help and benefit. I think sometimes there are some bad connotations to doulas, right? They're just these like pushy, know-it-all people that just want to come and take over the birth room and tell doctors what to do and ignore the nurses. And I'll be honest, there might be some out there. Right. But that's not the general group of us. Most of us want to help and we want to support and we want to be allies with the people that are doing the birth work, that are delivering the babies and taking care of the babies and the mamas. But I think educating people on what doulas do, educating them on how beneficial they are, and the difference they make statistically to specifically people of color. And then I think also educate on, people think about doulas and like, oh my gosh, that's only for rich people. I don't have the money. But helping them to understand, at least in New York State, Medicaid covers doulas, right? So if you're a Medicaid patient, you actually can have a doula as your support person through delivery and postpartum. And so I think those kind of things, we just need to help people to understand what's out there. I think there's so much out there that a lot of people don't know. They don't know that there are lactation consultants and specialists out there. They don't know that there are doulas, labor doulas and postpartum doulas. They don't know that there are specialists in different, I think there are just a lot of things that people don't know. And so don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know something, you're limited in how far you can go and what you can accomplish. So I think the biggest thing is to just educate people to understand how much support is available to them. And hopefully that helps to make a difference in them being able to get the breastfeeding support that they need and they should have and deserve.
Wonderful. It has been a wonderful speaking to you, Shalawn, about all the wonderful, your experience in general and just, the work that you've been doing for the last 20 years and the work that you continue to do, and truly grateful. And I mean, I guess I knew this, but now it's like, we're like right here, like in our vision of exactly what it should look like. And I'm so glad we got this opportunity to speak and for our audience to really hear about why this is so important. And I want you all to stay tuned and, continue to learn as much as possible, especially when it comes to your health for moms and babies. We really want a healthier future. And until next time, I'm concluding. Thank you again, Shalawn, and everyone.